suddenly the noise level started to go up and I heard a siren and people started to be brought into the hospital. It was packed with children who were burned. A bomb that day, that plane was not targeting the hospital, it was targeting the school next door. I am the eldest of 6 children. We had a bit of a gap, so for a while there was just 3 of us, and then when I was 11, 3 more came along. So my life changed at that point a little bit because my mum was quite unwell. So I went from having a pretty sort of stress-free, normal childhood to becoming almost a bit of a carer for my mum and then for my siblings. Yeah, I think up until the age of 16 or 17, it was quite bumpy.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I reflect a lot on that time. It was hard, it was challenging. We didn't do it alone. And it's really made me appreciate what my parents did for us. The family motto is to stand on your own 2 feet and don't depend on anyone. And I think because of those years, as soon as I had the opportunity to go to university, I kind of felt the need to go north. So I ended up doing chemistry in Salford University. By that point, kids were old, siblings were older, mum was better. So yeah.
Be independent.
Yeah, and I could really go for it.
What did you find at Salford?
On Freshers, I was walking around and there was a stand where they were saying, do you want to do the crypt and fracture assault course? And I thought, oh my God, yes. It was brilliant. It was the assault course and it was up in Manchester and I signed up and it was essentially for the officer training corps. And it was such a brilliant day. And I wanted to come back for more. And I joined.
What is the officer training corps?
It's military training for university students. And the main thing is to introduce them to what a military career could be. What I really enjoyed about the officer training corps was being amongst like-minded people. You've all been through some hardship together, whether it's, getting on a coach on Friday when everyone else at university life is going out and, having a party. You're getting in a coach to head somewhere really bleak and cold in your green uniform with a big, massive rucksack, and you're going to spend the weekend in a ditch somewhere, carrying lots of stuff, getting frozen cold, having no sleep, but love it and doing it with your mates.
So naturally, that progression led you to join the army.
I wanted to see if I could do Sandhurst, the most competitive thing I've ever applied to do. There's so many stages. I'll be knocked out of one of them because I'm just from Essex. I'm not posh, not rich. I don't have a double-barreled name. I'll probably not make it. I wasn't actually aware of the fact that I was the only non-white person. For me, I was more terrified, am I going to actually pass the running test the next day, doing your 1.5 miles in 12 minutes. Those things were the things that really terrified me. I didn't want to sort of fail on those things. And I think that takes away a lot of the other stuff. The stuff of, am I different? Am I, they're all blokes and there's just a few of us who are women. It's the task that you've got to do. And if you do it and just survive and make it to the end, I love the simplicity of that. That for me cuts out all the noise and all the rubbish.
And you did it. You became a soldier.
I was commissioned as an officer into the Royal Army Medical Corps, not as a doctor, as a non-medical support officer. And one of the main reasons that I did that was because when you're at Sandhurst, you've got to decide who you're going to join. And for me, I wanted to deploy as soon as possible. And they were deploying to Bosnia. I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to get out. I want to go. So I joined them. We got there in 97. I was sent to Gornji Vakuf, which was an area that was Bosniaks, so Bosnian Muslims and Croats. So, and their front line was like a road, in the middle of town. I remember it very well. They were about to have their own referendum, if you like, the voting of the future of their country. So we were there to help maintain this stability to allow people to come back. And then I remember one particular day, we had our field hospital, and then I heard that my combat medics within my troop had deployed to a house to pick up some trauma victims. And essentially it was two young men, late 20s, early 30s, who had arrived home from being overseas in Norway as refugees, who had come home to vote, and they had walked into their front garden and stepped on booby-trapped mines. There were landmines in their gardens. They had suffered a traumatic amputation of their lower limbs. And I wasn't a doctor at this time at all. I knew nothing about medicine, but I was in a medical unit, and my boss at that point was Major Kev Beaton, who was a medic, a GP, but who had gone into sort of the command side of the army. And he said to me, "Sal, have you ever seen any trauma?" And I went, "No, sir." And he went, "Right, watch this." And that's quite brave. Now that I'm a doctor, I don't think I would ever make someone say to someone, "Do you want to have a look at this?" Because they'd probably pass out. And I remember standing there was a group of us, and we were watching the incredible professionalism of the military medics and how they dealt with this. And they had two of them to deal with at the same time. Normally, you have one and it sucks everyone, the resources. They had two. And it was perfectly executed. It was so professional. And I was so impressed. And I remember just turning around to Kev saying, "I think I want to be a doctor." And he said, "Fine, I'll write your reference." So I served my 4 years, but I was going to have to leave to become a civilian for the first time in, years, and not have my military number. Do medicine for 2 years on my own. That's the rule. So I started, as soon as I became a civilian again, I also did two things. I went to countries that I wouldn't have been allowed to go to were I in the military still. And I strategically used all my holidays to do freelance work and to develop my further sort of interest in healthcare in armed conflict. So one of the first projects I did as a medical student, and I definitely don't advocate this now because the world is so different. The world is, I can say that it just feels so much more dangerous now to back then. But back then, I did go to Palestine, and I spent 4 or 5 months with medics in Nablus, and I basically followed Palestinian medics delivering healthcare under curfew and during the Second Intifada, and it was really tense. It was really scary. It was like a pressure cooker. Just the year before, I would have been the military, but now I was a civilian, and I felt utterly horrified and shocked when I realised that I'm being shot at.
That sounds terrifying.
I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't. I do know what the sound of gunfire is. And I remember thinking, "Ooh, what's that?" And then suddenly you saw the doctors hit the deck. And I thought, yeah, my God, we are literally being shot at by a sniper. And I just remember even then, just the level of fear was just off the scale. I remember speaking to a medic who was literally doing secret satellite clinics. He was exhausted because he was moving location every few days. This was also the time where medics were being killed and detained and disappearing. I saw healthcare workers being shot at. I saw healthcare workers being picked up and detained. Medics were essentially being told who they could and could not treat. And that's not in our remit. That's not what our medical ethics say. We don't triage according to what your affiliation is or what uniform you're wearing. We triage according to the injury and your need. That's the priority. And even within the Geneva Conventions, there is a section that specifically talks about that. If someone from the opposing side is more worse off clinically, you treat them first before your own side. It's there in black and white. I think Syria turned a page in the world of attacks against healthcare. I remember standing on the border, and not only do I remember, I've got photographs of it, of watching an ambulance being painted black. What kind of world, how mad is that? Painted black so they don't initially realise, unless they stop us, that it's an ambulance. And I remember specifically in Syria being told, where's your stethoscope? Take it out of this bag, put it in the boot, hide it.
Because they'd know you're a doctor.
Yeah.
What were the kind of injuries you were treating on a regular basis in Syria? What did you see?
So in Syria, I went 3 times actually. The second time was horrendous. At the beginning of August, there'd been a horrendous chemical attack. Women and children and civilians lying dead, looking like they were asleep, poisoned by sarin. I was working in a hospital in Aleppo, just the outskirts of Aleppo, in a place called Atareb. And it was a relatively quiet day that day. And in medicine, you're not really supposed to say the Q word, because if you say it, it's not going to be quiet. That's just the unwritten rule. And lo and behold, that day, I think it was one of the worst days of my life clinically. It was something I just could not believe that I was witnessing. We had been aware of something flying overhead. So it was a Syrian aircraft, a Syrian pilot. And we kept having to evacuate the hospital that day, thinking it was coming for us. And in my head, I remember thinking, if it's a chemical attack, it's going to affect all of us. It's going to affect my patient. It probably already has. And it will affect me. Suddenly, the noise level started to go up, and I heard a siren, and people started to be brought into the hospital. And I remember the people were actually children. And the first child that I was called to see was a baby that was covered in scalds. And when it was me and the baby, it was just me, the baby, and a few others in the emergency room, I turned around, it was packed. It was packed with children who were burned with the most horrific burns. A bomb that day, that plane was not targeting the hospital, it was targeting the school next door. So it literally just 50 minutes away, it had dropped a thermal bomb, a Soviet-made thermal bomb with jellied fuel so that it sticks to the surface and burns more. That's what had hit that school. And we had about 28 children who were brought in to our little ED. And I remember this young boy, he was just standing there. He was covered in sort of a dust thing from the debris of the bomb. And he had the most horrendous head wound, like the whole skull was exposed. And he was just standing there in shock and presenting himself to me. I'm used to working in a resus where, if he'd walked in to our ED, everything would stop. We'd be, right on him. But it was him, and it was the other one, and it was another one, and it was another one. And there were just a few of us as medics, and we also had very limited equipment and medication. We didn't have, everything that we would need. How
does it make you feel to know that you can't help someone to the best of your ability because you don't have the equipment?
It felt heartbreaking and shocking that this, that was 2013. I still can't believe it happened. I was there.
People died that day?
Children under the age of 18. Where we are now is that this thing of attacks against healthcare and armed conflict is no longer considered a niche little subject that, it doesn't really happen. Now, I think practically everyone knows it happens. And not only that it's happening, that it also seems to be some sort of tactical development. It's a strategy, military strategy, that you target healthcare.
What safety are you afforded as a doctor, and what are the limitations for being a healthcare worker in those environments?
Being a medic right now I think, in a war zone is probably one of the most dangerous jobs that you can be doing at the moment. Horrendous stories that are coming through from colleagues in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Palestine, in Gaza. And we know about the horrors of Syria that we are now trying to unpick through. I really believed in these legal instruments, and that the Geneva Conventions that we had been, when I was in Green, briefed on chapter and verse, and that we had to carry our rules of engagement in our pockets, that they are not observed everywhere in the same way. And there's no accountability. That's a problem. There's no one, you can break the rules, like in any other sort of section of law. You break the rules, you do the crime, you pay for it. But that doesn't happen within international humanitarian law. Within hospitals, we don't have armed guards and things like that. I mean, there's a big debate about whether that should happen or not. But then again, how do you protect against someone dropping a bomb on the hospital? Do we then have to start building hospitals underground? Is that really the world that we are working into, that now hospitals need to be built underground because there are people out there who think it's all right to bomb a hospital? Is that really the world that we want and we want to live in? And I also argue that just because it's happening over there doesn't mean it can't happen here. I'm really worried about where we are right now. I think the world's gone slightly bonkers. And I think we're in for a rough ride. But the hope comes from the fact that good people are lining up together. And that's what gives me hope, that there are amazing people out there. I've painted a bleak picture of bad things happening. But you know what? Those bad people are in the minority. And I think that's just, that just symbolises where we are right now, that we all kind of need to come together and work together. We've got, I think, a lot of work to do in the next few years.
I remember I was confronted at one point in Liberia, during the Liberian Civil War, with a pile of bodies. Civilians, men and women, children,